Poke the Bear is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 154. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. It's been an exciting last 24 hours. It's rare that we get to sort of be on the frontier of a new social media website, of somewhere that might have some legs. Threads. What are your first impressions of this?
I mean, it's fine, Evan. Like, ideally, Twitter, which we've all, I think, used for many years, is functioning correctly, isn't run by a dipshit, and is causing us to have to migrate. So, perfect world, I would just stay on Twitter, and everything will be hunky-dory. But alas, we'll see. Again, we'll see if the actual migration does happen. But if you need to follow us on Threads, we're on there. What is my handle? I don't even think I even know what it is or whatever they call it. But we're both on there, and it's a good little safeguard in case things go to shit. But I'm not putting it in my outro yet in terms of where you can find me on Threads. Just look me up, and I'm on there.
It's there. Yeah, I'm the same way. I was shocked at how quickly brands and teams migrated over. I mean, it launched late Wednesday, and by Thursday, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was threading about clam chowder in Boston, and the Bruins had stuff up from Fenway with the development camp, and you have brands, you have the regulars, creating, because it is linked to Instagram. I think that's why there is a chance this catches on because it's with Instagram. If this was just a random website that just kind of popped up, I think it'd be a little different. But I think the Instagram element to it helps it. Now again, Instagram has Reels, and TikTok still exists, and TikTok does great. So can they coexist? Probably. But I said this to you at development camp on Thursday. There was an article that popped up on my phone, and it said check out the differences between Threads and Twitter. And I'm like, well, that might as well be 0 words, because there are no differences. There is really nothing different between Threads and Twitter.
Nope.
And so we'll see what happens. But I agree with you. I'm on there. So it's like Club Aqua. I go there. You go there. You go to Club Aqua. I go there. I'm
don't
curious.
Go to the patio.
Yeah, no, don't go to the patio. Kim Kardashian's face fell off, or head fell off.
People are like, what the fuck is going on? Anyway.
It's the heat. It's getting to our heads. Anyway, we'll get to development camp in a second. First, though, the free agents met with the Boston media on Wednesday. Some of them did. One of them was Morgan Geekie, and it's interesting because we touched on him in Bruins beat as someone who this could be a big year for him. And the Bruins said to him, you're going to have a bigger role than you're used to. You're going to have the opportunity for that, at least. Do you think he is up to the task to fulfill a bigger role?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see where exactly he does fit into the lineup, and some of it might depend on where exactly other guys are, right? If Bergeron or Krejci are back, then, he could be a guy that's a third-line player on the wing, which is where he played a lot of time this past year with Seattle. But if you're in a spot where both those guys aren't there and Coyle's bumped up into a top 6 role, then maybe he's your third-line center, right? I think regardless of where he fits in, he's a guy that seems like he's destined for more minutes. When you look at just what he did this past year, especially when you weigh it against the fact he's only a $2 million cap hit, it's not bad for what he's been able to produce down there. I mean, he's a guy who had 28 points last season while averaging 10.27 of ice time per game. So that's below guys like Garnett Hathaway, who was 11 minutes. Brent Frederick was 11.55 of average ice time. That's a guy who didn't play a lot of, special teams or anything like that. Even Nick Foligno averaged almost 12.30. So Geekie not really factoring that heavily into the lineup. So to get that amount of points for that limited amount of reps, I mean, his 2.47 5-on-5 points per 60 was, let me do a little math here, 31st in the NHL among a pool of 593 skaters in terms of points per usage rate, essentially. Beyond guys like Keller, Eichel, Draisaitl, Ovechkin.
I'm putting that on Threads right now. That's going straight to Threads.
And again, I think you preface that by saying it does not mean just because Morgan Geekie, you give him 15, 16 minutes of ice time per game or of added ice time per game, he's all of a sudden going to be a 65, 70-point guy. That's not what we're saying. But in terms of what the minutes that he had last year, there's more to build off of it, right? And I think you look at what he provides. He's got a really good shot, has to work on his skating a little bit, but a big body at 6'3", can kind of do a little bit of everything. Can make you pay in transition with that shot, but can bring the puck down low. He's a guy that, I don't know if he's exactly cut from the same cloth as a guy like Pavel Zacha, but I think the Bruins are hoping he kind of follows a similar script in terms of has talent, maybe was underutilized in a different role on his previous team, and whether it's them getting just more growth out of his own game with those added minutes, or also surrounding him with maybe higher end talent, where, last year he was on a very deep Seattle team, but not really a lot of high end skill on that fourth line. They'll then get more out of him. So I think he's a guy. I think you look at the rest of the free agent signings, Milan Lucic, James Van Riemsdyk, even Kevin Shattenkirk, kind of know what you're getting with them. Geekie, if he's a guy that gives you 20, 25 points in a bottom six role, this, pretty solid value there for what he brings and versatility, good on faceoffs. But if he gives you 40, 45 or something like that and develops into a great key piece for this team moving forward, especially at a $2 million cap hit, there's a higher return there for a guy. So he's definitely a guy I think it's worth following as the season kind of goes on.
Yeah, I mean, even as you were talking, you mentioned, if Coyle goes up into a top six role, they may go, if they don't do any more moves, they may go with Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, at times, and that would, I would believe, lead to a DeBrusk, Zacha, Coyle second line. And then on the third line, you have Geekie as your number 3 center. And as you said, high upside, relatively high upside, similar to a Zacha type in terms of, how you're getting him, maybe underutilized in his last spot. And maybe you put him with, James Van Riemsdyk and Trent Frederick. Again, that's not half bad. That's why, again, the Bruins keep getting, not keep getting, by, people who don't know a ton about the Bruins are getting, crapped on for their free agent performance. We said this on in Bruins Beat. I think it was pretty good. I actually think that they, are they Stanley Cup favorites? No, we didn't expect that, but they did a lot with not a lot of money. And this is an example of taking a flyer on a guy who has the tools to potentially reach higher in the lineup. Is he going to be a top 6 guy? It's hard to say yet. Probably not. But even last year with Zacha, we said, it's a good third, potential third line left wing. Develops into a second line stalwart. So, again, you don't know with this, but I think the opportunity is there. That's the biggest thing, is the opportunity for a guy like Morgan Geekie is there this year. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. He'll be an interesting one to watch next season.
Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets for up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything, from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to crush the first home run of the game. And frankly, that's the best part of FanDuel. You can bet on anything. You want to wager on the odds of how many dingers Rafael Devers will hit this year? Be my guest. Maybe the Bruins over-under for wins next season. Go for it. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/Boston to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
Speaking of guys who have upside and potential, Bruins development camp's been this week. It's been great. Everybody's back. It's so hot outside, so it's nice and cool indoors. That's my biggest takeaway from this week. I can't hate that. And it's always fun during development camp because you see, the thoughts on different prospects. This one's ready to make the Bruins. This one's you ready to go to make a push for Boston, this and that. And there's no real blue chip prospect. I don't think there's any, can't miss prospect in this pool. There's good ones, and we'll get to them. But it begs the question of, are there any prospects from this camp that crack the team next year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably unlikely, or a lot maybe has to go either really good for these individual players or a lot wrong for the state of the NHL roster.
Really bad the other way.
I mean, I think the two most obvious ones, right, are Fabian Lysell and Mason Lohrei. And again, if you're expecting them to push for a spot right out of camp, I just find that unlikely. Like Lysell, high-end skill. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about him, especially, I mean, you look at the state of the Bruins prospect kind of pipeline, but he's a guy that if he hits at the NHL level could be a legit top 6 winger, right? And it's not to say that I think he's a 40 goal scorer, but I think he can be a very productive player at the NHL level. But still, this is a guy who kind of hit a wall last year in the AHL, kind of needed a bit of a fresh start. So barring him just going nuclear, during preseason play, I think you start him in Providence, have him build his game up some more. And if you get to November and he's got 20 points in 21 games or something like that, then maybe you reevaluate, because he's a guy that I'm sure the Bruins would like to make a push. Like, I think you look at top 6 now and just looking on the wing, you have to imagine, right, like Marchand, DeBrusk, first line, maybe second line, like Van Riemsdyk, Pasternak. If you have a point in the season where a guy like Lysell can push and all of a sudden you're able to put him in the top 6 and you put DeBrusk back at left wing and all of a sudden you've got, a lot of talent there in that top 6. So he's a guy that definitely is worth watching. I think he's been really good during dev camp. Was slowed down. He took a cheap shot late in the season, ended his first Providence year early. Still recovering from it. On Thursday was the first day he actually didn't have a non-contact jersey on. So a little bit of a slower ramp up, but I mean, you can see the skill, like the skating is there, playmaking, all that stuff. So again, don't think he'll crack the team out of camp, but someone that I think could be in line for a promotion if he really has a strong start to his second year. Then Lohrei, same thing, right? Like, as of right now, the Bruins defense is set, but if you're moving on from a guy to make more cap room, Lohrei is a guy that if he can push and all of a sudden be a third pairing guy out of the gate, kind of cut his teeth in that role, not cost a lot of money. And I mean, if he's a guy that I think we've talked about before, if he hits, he's either at his lowest level is maybe like a sheltered but really good playmaking defenseman that you put in your third D pair. If he hits, he's like, I don't know, like John Carlson, right? Like in terms of like 6'4", big body, not necessarily going to be like a wrecking ball out there, but just having someone who's takes up that much space, can protect the net, while also move the puck with authority, generate shots from blue line. There's so much value in just having those kind of two-way players on your blue line. So, but again, a guy that really didn't play all that much in Providence last year, finished up his sophomore year at Ohio State. So barring, again, him really making a sustained push and other moves kind of falling where they might be in the Bruins decor, don't see him starting the year. Still, 6'4", needs to put on some weight, needs to, I think, adjust the AHL level. But those are the two guys that I think, if all goes right, would not put past like them checking them out in November, December if they get to the point and they're playing at a high level.
I go back to this. We say this every year with these prospects. There is nothing wrong with extra time in Providence. Nothing. You don't want to rush these guys. And Lohrei is the interesting one because I think, Lysell spent the entire last season in Providence. Lohrei was, I think, there for 5 games after Ohio State bowed out. So again, like, he needs a season to adjust. And as you said, if he's tearing it up and it's December or January and it's like, oh, he deserves a look, like, then that's legitimate. But give him the year to adjust to Providence. I think that's a very good thing. It's a different style, like a pro game, more physicality, definitely faster. There's nothing wrong with that. Lysell's interesting also just because, you just look at it, as you said, like, you'd think, oh, maybe, the second year he jumps up to Boston. It wouldn't surprise me with this lineup, as you said, to see him crack it at some point throughout the season, come up for a couple of games and sort of see what you have in him, get his feet wet at the NHL level. Because you said, like, if they do go that route, if they went Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak and said, maybe, we could keep Coyle on the third line, put Lysell on the second as the right wing, or, we could put, Coyle in the second and put Lysell on the third. Like, there are options there they have. You don't need to push it. We both agree on, so far through 4 days, it's been drills, some battle drills, some one-on-ones and 2v2s and things like that. But the real test is going to be Friday, the day you're listening to this, is a scrimmage at 10 a.m. That's where you see guys. That's where, you really evaluate and how they play in games. So I try to not do a lot of like, oh, he was good in this edge work drill. He's ready for the NHL. And you see that a lot with some of these guys. But Lohrei is a very good skater for being 6'4", like really strong skater. And, if that can translate, if those decisions can become quicker at the AHL and NHL level with the puck and the physicality element, if he settles into that, like you have I'm not going to say franchise defenseman, but you have a steady NHL defenseman potentially. And I think that's a very good thing. I don't think, you don't need him to be Charlie McAvoy or Hampus Lindholm. You just need him to be steady and stable. And I think he has the tools that could potentially kind of lead to that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you look at it, not even this year, but look at next season when you're kind of building a foundation, you got a lot of guys signed long-term. We've already talked about it. You got a lot of cap space that you can really spend and retool. If you don't have to focus on your decor and your top four for the next 4 or 5 years is Lohrei, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, a lot of heft there. And again, you can look at Brendan Carlo and these guys and Mason Lohrei maybe aren't bruisers, but in terms of just being bigger bodies, if that's your top four and you got four guys who can do a little bit of everything, Carlo's great on the PK, still at a really young age. Lindholm's the oldest one. By next year will be what? 30, 31, like he's still in the prime of his time, of his career. Like if you're building towards something, you've got a pretty good foundation to start with just on that blue line.
Connor, you got to blow it up, blow the whole thing up. Who wants that?
Yes,
Who
exactly.
Wants that?
So I think you look long term beyond just this year. If you can get guys like Lohrei and Lysell into games, have them get used to the NHL level, and especially next year. Like that's why I think we mentioned on the last podcast, like this upcoming season should at least offer some more clarity for the Bruins in terms of got a lot of money to spend, but hell, if we don't have to spend on a guy like Noah Hannafin because we have a left shot D like Mason Lohrei in place, saves us more money. We can use that for a center. If we know that a guy like Fabian Lysell can step in and could be a 20-25 goal scorer on the wing and a middle six role moving forward, save money there as well, right? So
maybe don't fade really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's one of those things that beyond just this year, and you hope that for any of these teams, especially a team like the Bruins that are so cap crunched that some younger players step into larger roles. And, it's not even just looking at those guys. You can look at Lauko or anyone else, but you look at just what the Bruins need from guys like Lysell and Lohrei. It'd be fascinating to see just if they can make a push because, again, I don't think they're going to rush them, but I'm sure they'll be very happy if they are putting up really impressive numbers right out of the gate down in Providence.
Yeah, I think it would make a huge difference because, again, this prospect pool is not ranked high. It's not particularly amazing one or anything like that. But if those two can hit at the NHL level and be legitimate players, that's pretty damn good. That's not too bad for what you got. That just because we're talking about those two guys does not mean there aren't other standouts because there are other guys who have stood out through 4 days. And it'll be interesting to see in the scrimmage on Friday. Who have been some of the guys that have caught your eye?
Yeah, I think one guy is definitely Matthew Poitras. Hopefully I haven't butchered that name, but I think you look at kind of that next wave of talent. I think what's the biggest issue for this team long term? It's depth down the middle, right? And again, yes. Poitras is a guy that we'll see kind of what his next step is. Probably is going back, I think, to Gulf next year, back in the OHL, but you look at what he's able to produce this last year, a guy that was drafted in the second round. People didn't know what exactly he was as a player, showed some flashes, needed to work on his skating. Almost had 100 points in the OHL this past year. And I think you notice even compared to last dev camp where I think you saw some flashes, but he seemed like he was a guy that is going to get most of his chances off of just being kind of a crafty, smart player. And I think he's still like that. I don't think like the skating or anything like that has stood out. It's not like Brett Harrison, another center who's got a really good shot, but I think you see him just being more confident, a little bit stronger on the puck. And those things can make a world of difference when you're a guy that thinks the game well and is really crafty like Poitras. So, put up really big numbers in the OHL if he's back there this year, but he's a guy that, again, I think maybe we probably just hyper focus on these center prospects. The Bruins so desperately need one, but I think if you're looking for a guy that has potential, top 6 aspirations, there's a lot to like about what a guy like Poitras can do, because it's not like it's just like one skill set. It's all about being crafty, slowing the play down, seeing the ice well. He's a guy that if he does trend to the next level, could have a very sustainable, effective NHL career.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've seen some stuff out there of like, oh, Poitras is ready for the NHL and the Bruins roster. It's like, nah, man, like pump the brakes. Like that's not the case.
Right.
And again, I don't think you can take that away from any of the 4 drill days we've seen so far. But that's the thing. It's like just there's no reason to rush these guys. And we go back to like the NHL roster is not, as good as it was last year. There's no way it could be, but it's fine. You don't need to rush prospects to get people. And even if you were tanking, you wouldn't need to rush prospects either, because it's like who the hell needs to win or anything. I know one guy that's caught my attention is Ryan Mast on D. Big guy, 6'5". I know obviously kind of how can't he catch your attention? He's so big, but I like his skating so far. When a big guy like that can move and has sort of the the good edges, and he's quick for his size and height, there's encouragement there. Doesn't mean that he's fully ready for the NHL, but that mixed with physicality, if he can develop a year in Providence, if he ends up there this upcoming year after being in, I think he was in Sarnia this past year, that's not bad. Like, maybe that's a guy who someday becomes a stable third pairing guy that, plays penalty kill and, can block some shots and things like that. So like, to me, he's someone that has stood out for that reason. And I think, you see teams like the Islanders lock guys like that up for 7 years, which I wouldn't go that far for. But I am curious to see how he develops this season, because I think there is something there in terms of just his movement. And maybe that, translates to some sort of success at the pro level. So,
yeah, I think it's the most important thing for any of these players is just finding out what their role is, and not like just like, focusing in on just what exactly they were projected as when they were drafted, right? Like maybe Fabian Lysell just becomes really effective third line guy, right? Like I look at someone like Johnny Beecher, and people will look at him as a first round pick and be like, well, he could be a really good fourth line center. And they're like, well, you drafted them in the first round. I'm like, well, if he's like your Sean Corrali for the next 5 years and brings you the value that Corrali did, when he was at the top of his game, there's value there in terms of what those guys bring and what their role is. So yeah, if Mask or any of these guys can become someone that can slot in and be just a stalwart in whatever their role is, whether it's on the third pair, second pair, what have you, there's value in just having guys that have the skill sets, have the ability to fill into, consistent minutes at the NHL level. So it's what you hope for if you're the Bruins. You're hoping to hit a home run every single time, but even if it's a guy that takes a step back or their trajectory changes a little bit in terms of where the development is, as long as they're taking out a roster spot and they're making the most of it and performing to their duties, you'll take that.
You'll take it. Produce a little bit. Have some value. The Corrali thing is a smart one with Beecher. Like, I remember obviously at the time it's like, oh, should he be in a first round pick? Well, they picked him in the first round. We can't go back and change that decision. All you can do is hope that he ends up, producing at the NHL level. And I think all signs point to him being a strong fourth line center, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, Not there's anything wrong with that. Seinfeld reference. Yes. Anyone else that's caught your eye this week?
Yeah, I'd say one other guy I'd mention is Andre Gasso, who's a 7th round pick, but has really impressed so far down in at Boston College. Again, 7th round pick, you don't really know what you're expecting from him, guys. He's a bit of an overager guy. But you look at his skill set, 6'4", power forward type player. Usually that's a guy that, especially when you look at where he was drafted and what that role is, you go up to the NCAA level. There's a lot of learning curves or adjustment, especially for some guys that are still kind of feeling out their body or feeling, where exactly they fit into a lineup, what their role is. And he was like earning top 6 minutes on BC and was dominating. I mean, he had a lot of really skilled players next to him, but I think Jamie Langenberger kind of touched on that. It's not to say that his whole stat line, I think he had almost 30 points as a freshman, which is really impressive, but it's not to say that he's just like the third wheel on a very, top, high skilled line for the Eagles. It also falls on the player to complement those players and do the little things well, whether it's driving to the net, creating space. Like a guy like him knows what his role is, and it fit in pretty well for what he provided. So if he's the guy that can hit, and again, I don't think he's a top 6 guy, but if he's a big bodied power forward that can just knows to play to his strengths, drive to the net, create space, get those second chance pucks and bury them, lot to like for, again, a 7th round pick. Like the Bruins, as much as you look at 7th round picks and where value is, whether it's guys like him, Ty Gallagher, all these kind of guys, at the very least, they look like guys that are going to make that jump up to the AHL and are going to be in the mix. And if you're a 7th round pick, kind of all you can ask for, right? So we'll see kind of how those guys develop, but just for his first year at BC, really encouraging signs. And considering the amount of talent BC has coming in this year, I'm sure he's going to have also another pretty impressive stat line. So he's a guy I think is definitely worth watching because I think he's been really, really good in camp so far.
Yeah, and also a lot of competition. My God, all those guys coming in: Smith, Leonard, Perreault, Cheese. Gusso's a good one. Myronberg came over in the Studnicka trade. Interesting guy. I'm curious to see him in the scrimmage on Friday. Solid skater. Maybe you have something there on D. Another sort of Ryan Mass situation where a guy comes in and, fills a, bottom pairing role. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, again, overall, the prospect pool is not there. It is not full of guys that, I don't think, aside from Lysell and Lohrei, there's no one that's like, oh, this guy's got, potential to be a superstar. There's none of that in this group. But like a Beckett Hendrickson, interesting player, curious to see what happens there. Could compete, things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's been no one else that, again, we haven't seen the scrimmage yet. Things can change with the scrimmage. Who stands out there, who doesn't. Is there anyone else from Dev Camp that we haven't touched on that has caught the Conor Ryan's attention?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is just individual skill set things. So, I mean, like Brett Harrison, someone who he's kind of gotten the Merkulov treatment where it's a lot of like high-end skill offensively. He needs to work on some other things. So we'll see kind of how he develops moving forward. But I think it was Langenbrunner who said he can kind of score from everywhere. He's got a heavy, accurate shot that every time he kind of gets the puck on his stick, you're watching for it. And he's been able to do quite a bit of damage during these kind of limited drills we've seen. So he's a guy that is definitely, I think, worth watching for during the scrimmage. And I think he's going to start this upcoming year on the wing in Providence. So if he gets going there and that one-timer kind of translates to a strong start for him, he's definitely someone to keep in the mix as well. Yeah.
And Dan's Lockmellis is, I think, going to UMass in the fall. So obviously got to keep tabs on him.
Of course.
My goodness. But yeah, interesting guys. Another one before we go, Mason Langenbrunner. I'm curious to see on Friday because the skating, again, looked pretty good. The defense has worked a ton on skating this week and things like that. So he's a guy that moves pretty well. Again, he's 6'3". So, a lot of big bodies back there. If they can skate too, can be dangerous. Can be dangerous sometimes. What's never dangerous is following Conor's work over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. What can you look forward to from you over there?
Yeah, we're gonna have you covered every step of the way, Evan. In terms
so dangerous.
Yes, covered every step of the way throughout this offseason. Again, it's gonna slightly calm down a little bit here now that Dev Camp's done. But whether it's additional signings, trades, looking at the guys the Bruins have brought in, we'll have you covered every step of the way over at Boston.com. So please read over there. You can also follow me on Twitter. We're not talking about threads yet. On Twitter, still at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We're presented by FanDuel. Have a great rest of your week.